Didn't know that I got 46 minutes left on here. I didn't know that you wasn't supposed to kill a snake in Cherokee Forest, and I was told later because if you'll go up into if you go out of Cherokee Forest, there's a stream right there that's still got trout running up and down it. And if you go up on the backside of Cherokee, you can go up the big hill like going to North Carolina, and you can actually go to North Carolina on that gravel road.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a bunch of trailers down through there, a bunch of people that live way out in the middle of the Timbuktu. But one of them told me, they said if you was to gotten caught with that snake or killing that snake, just killing that snake, it would have been something like a $1,500 fine and possibly a year in prison.
All right. You know, not all of it. Everybody never.
But I did cut its tail off. I did go back with a knife and I cut its tail off. Like I said, me and her, we just didn't get along. And I wound up having to knock the thing in the head several times to ever kill it. But it had 46 bubs.
Oh, old snake.
46 bubs.
Oh.
And it wasn't long after that to where I wound up going down there at, I guess it's Madison. It may not be Madison. It's where they got a museum down there with a bunch of telephones in it.
I'm not familiar with that now.
Okay.
Not familiar with that.
Well, I was down there talking to this guy, and about that time somebody come in. He's got all kinds of telephones. Mall Bell, every telephone that's ever been designed from day one was in this guy's place.
All right.
And this guy come in with a like a rag over this item, and he set it down on the counter. He said, "I got something I need for you to look at and tell me what you think it's worth." And the guy undone it, and it was a pottery plate about that big right there. And I'll never forget it because it actually frightened me. It had a hand in it. And in the hand, it had an eye in the center of the hand that looked like an eye.
Yeah.
And it had two rattlesnakes, one wrapped around one side and the other wrapped around the other side. And whenever the guy took that out and that owner of that property looked at it, he said, "My God," he said, "you don't have no earthly idea, of course, what the value of this thing is." He goes, "Well, he said, I was raised up around here." He said, "Me and my buddy, we was out on a creek bed one day, and we come across it, and I've had the thing for about 35, 40, maybe 50 years. I don't know how old the guy was." He said, "There's only been known of two that's been found in East Tennessee, and those are in the museum down in Atlanta." He said, "If you take it down there," he said, "you can't put a price on it." And that was way before, that was basically way before even Christ. It was way before any type of information could have come to America towards knowing about Jesus Christ. So how did they have an ideal about that hand with a hole in it?
I don't know.
But now they're discovering things right now. I don't know if you keep up with the news or not, but they're discovering things right now down around Lake Mead, down around the Colorado River and stuff. They're finding stuff down there that goes all the way back to the ancient Egyptian days.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
There was people that lived here thousands and thousands of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And they've also found fossils up in the Rocky Mountains. I'm talking about 14, 18,000 feet above sea level. They have found fossils up there. And there ain't no way that you can find fossils unless the property had been flooded up in that area.
I got Indian Rock Forest, 10,000 years old. It's Clovis, named after Clovis, New Mexico. First found the first one in Carbon days.
Well, wasn't there a group of Indians that they just take notice of not too long ago that they discovered in this area?
Oh, I don't know. I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard all that. These tribes here, they moved all the time. It's hard to tell what tribe was right here because they might be here a year and they gone. They moved on.
Well, let me ask you something. It was Jackson Andrew Jackson, which I'm supposed to be kin to in some sort of way, I it's a shameful thing to be kin to somebody like him. It really is, because what he done to the Native American people, he just slaughtered them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they used that gold up there in eastern Tennessee, up there in the Smoky Mountains, towards the reason why they wanted to run them off. But I run upon to a group of people. You know where Robinson, North Carolina is?
Yeah.
Okay. They've got a thing called the Dragon. It's a highway that's 11 miles. It's got something like 216 curves in the thing. Well, if you go to Robinsonville and go up, like going up into the Appalachians, because they got some good bear hunting stuff up in there, late in the fall and the wintertime, there's a place called Snowbird. Now Snowbird is where they made that movie of the Moonshiners that was on TV for a while. It was probably on TV about like the Gator People.
Snowbird, the mountain. Yeah.
With a bunch of Indians in there that to this day still can't speak a bit of English.
Yeah.
Still can't speak a bit of English, but the reason why that it was notorious towards moonshine was because of the water that was coming out of the stream.
Yeah.
It had a natural
limestone water.
Yeah, limestone water. And I got to talking to him up in that area, another guy, and he told me, he said, now this tribe of Indian, these Cherokee Indians up here has a bone with the Cherokee Indians over in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I go, well, why do they got a problem with the Indians over in Oklahoma? He said, because they got captured. They got captured and they was forced away from their territory over in Oklahoma, and those that's still up there in the North Carolina, still up there in the Appalachian Mountains, they never did get captured. They was smart enough or clever enough that they snuck away from them, and they actually have a personal vendetta against those Indians, because they feel like that those Indians over there in Oklahoma, they feel like that they betrayed them.
I was in the Army with a Cherokee up there. In fact, I went to see him just before he died. He passed away. He was up in Mount Eagle. He lived up there. He's full-blooded Cherokee, just an older man. He retired in the Army.
Well, you know, you get in some of the mountains, even up there in Kentucky. You get up there in eastern Kentucky, where the Hatfields and McCoys was.
No, I don't want anything.
Up around Pikeville, Kentucky. You get up there in eastern Kentucky, you can come upon to some people that are so hillbillyish, so redneckish, that they can't even hardly, their whole lingo is different than ours. Whenever they talk, you have trouble understanding what they're saying.
That's called Old English. I've been around them people.
Have you?
Yeah, they throw in words like yearns and wins and run again. Stuff like that, and it's called Old English. It's up there. I think they even teach it in school. It's a phonics or whatever they call it stuff. I don't know. But yeah, I've been around them people. Yearns.
Why do they add that on the back end of that?
Well, it's just like
slang. Is that what it is? Slang?
Well, no, it's just their way of talking. That's the way they've been programmed to talk, and it's just their language up there. That's where they've. But I've known them people up there. I've stayed with them. I've been all in them mountains. I've been over at Hazard. I've been to Harlan, all over in there. I've been all over the country.
Have you ever been to Florence? Did you go that far north up into Florence?
No. I went to Florence. I haven't been to Florence, Alabama.
Yeah. Well, there's a place up there called Florence that's right there across from Cincinnati, across from the Ohio River, same river, Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
And what was her name? Anyways, down below Florence, probably about an hour, there's a place called Big Bone. And the reason why they call it Big Bone is because they got this big tusk that come out of I guess it was something kind of like uh,
Mammoth.
a mammoth.
Yeah.
And the daggum tusk is something like 26 foot long.
Good grief.
Yes, sir.
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So whenever you get to talking about primitive stuff and people that's been here for years and years and years, we have invaded a territory that really don't belong to us.
No, we don't belong to us. I was watching television the other night. All that these people that are all that there's a white woman telling a Native American Indian she needs to go back to her country. And it just floored me. I just laughed out on that. She was telling that Native American that she needs to go back to her country. White woman was. You got to give me. That took the cake to me.
Do you watch any of the History Channel?
All the time.
Okay. That we've got equipment now that can look down into the forest and act,
Yeah.
and they're finding stuff in the Amazon forest that they ain't never thought that they'd
Yeah.
find. That tribal people that's been
Right.
living down there for thousands and thousands of years,
Yeah.
and even to this day, if you come across a group of them that they can't speak a bit of English,
No.
and to be quite frank with you, those that can speak English will tell you we don't want to have nothing to do with the modern world.
Yeah.
They rather live in the woods like that. That's their home. That's their home. But I truly believe that whenever the Great Flood did in fact occur, I personally believe that the Egyptians and some other groups of people had tapped into something that is similar towards what we have tapped into as far as energy, as far as radio waves and short waves and telephone frequencies and stuff like that. But they was using it in a different method because they have found skulls that was a perfectly round symmetrical circle in their head, to where they was possibly even doing brain surgery back
I've
then.
seen that. Yeah.
And to cut those rocks out that perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't even do that today with our modern day machinery. I mean, how in the world did they do it? So they had to have some sort of, they had to have tapped in on some knowledge or something. And I tend to wonder that that's the reason why God destroyed that world, was because he knew that what that they was doing with that, they was using it for evil. They was using it for a bad way. And I think it's got to do with sorcery. I think it's got to do with like magic and stuff like that that they had tapped into. And of course, whenever God destroyed that world, there was another world before that world that God destroyed, and he destroyed that world with ice, the Great Ice Age.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm going with all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I truly believe that there was a group of people down in the Amazon area, pretty close to the equator, because the equator basically stays, it's tropical down there.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the warmest part of the world. I truly believe that there was a group of people that survived the Ice Age.
I don't know.
Not only did they
know.
survive the Ice Age, but they also survived the flood. Don't ask me how, but they're saying now that there was a group of people, and this may be the lost tribe. It talks in the Bible about 12 tribes, but there's actually a 13th tribe, and I think that it was a tribe of people that come from the old primitive era. And I guess in a way, I don't believe in Darwin's theory pertaining to us coming out of the ocean and becoming a living cell, and then eventually turning into a monkey and then turning into a man. But I do believe that we did evolve. I don't think that the people in the old primitive times, I don't think that they had a spirit or a soul. I don't think that they had a conscience, but they did have love pertaining to how that they took care of their own. Because, they fed their own. They multiplied. But they claim that there was a group of people, either the Mayans or the Cocopallis or somebody, that basically migrated from South America, somewhere down around the equator, and come up the coast, come up Mexico, and come all the way up through America, and basically landed somewhere between America and Alaska, somewhere in that area, and then they merged and they come back down south, and that's where the Indians come from.
I don't know. I don't know.
Their blood, they don't even have the same blood as we got.
Yeah.
They have a different DNA. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they got something like 26 chromosomes. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes, sir. They have a special blood type.
Hmm.
So is it possible that there was a group of people that survived the Ice Age and then they evolved and they survived the flood and then they evolved even more so, and now basically it's the Native Americans. We're talking about the indigenous people.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there's so much about history. There's so much about not just our history, but the world in general, that I don't even think our minds could contain it all. Do you?
No, we don't. We're just tapping into a little of what's going on in this world.
Yes, sir.
We're not sure. We don't know, especially about the past and all that. Of course,
They say that they say that the ocean of this day, that we don't know but about 2% of it towards what's actually down there.
we know more about the bottom. We do the bottom of the ocean.
Probably.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, but it's a hostile territory down
But
there.
whenever I was out at LBL doing my thing, whenever I first got acquainted with them in 1989, I went from house to house, knocking on people's doors and getting testimonies from people. And about 2/3 of them at that time that was still living was older people. They would tell me that the reason why that Kennedy got assassinated was because of what he done up there in 1963, whenever they declared that piece of property up there towards it being no good, and they run them all off, and that was the third time that they'd been roughed up. See, the first time was on the Tennessee Riverside, TVA. The second time, it was on the opposite side, the Cumberland River. That's whenever they had to move their territories and go inland, get a little tighter. And then all of a sudden, here come Kennedy that flew over in 1963 and said, would declare it all as a national park or a hunting refuge, and let's get them all off there. Because up until that time, it wasn't nothing, and I know that you know this, it wasn't nothing for them to lose 5 or 6, maybe even 7, 8, 10 revenuers a year, because they would stumble up on them moonshine steals down there, and them old boys would get them and knock them in the head and throw them in the river, and nobody never hear or see anything from them. They had a big business going from LBL going up into Indianapolis, Indiana, and they had a big business going from LBL going up into Chicago. So whenever the Kennedys done what they done, and of course what made the Kennedys famous was basically moonshine.
Yeah.
Rum is what made them famous. That's where they got all their money at up there east of New York. And whenever that happened, I truly believe that somebody put the word out and said, "Get him out of here."
I don't know.
Because at that time they went through a move between 1936 up until they flooded that river, which was long about 1941 or 42, Tennessee River.
39.
Was it 39 whenever they flooded it? Okay. So they already had to move inland, and we're talking about areas that they flooded. We're talking about flooding stores. We're talking about flooding churches. We're talking about flooding schools.
Whole town. Stribbles on.
Well, there was a town up there called Birmingham. Are you familiar with Birmingham?
No, I'm not.
Still under the water.
Well, Stribble lives too.
Where was Scribble at?
Between Paris Landing and Danville. Pretty good sized little community. Stribble, but it's on the water now. Ain't nothing left here.
Well, you know that the old Johnsonville, it flooded too.
Well, yeah, it was a.
Did you ever know about them boys got hung up there at pretty close to Danville up there?
No, I never heard that. I've been up there all my life. I've never heard that one.
You ain't never heard where that mill right there in the middle of the river, now it's nothing but a concrete structure, still stands up.
That's not a mill.
Whatever it was, but there was about and you can look it up. It's in the history book. It was about 20 black boys that got hung, and the way they was hanging them, they was putting a piece of wire on around their neck, and they was just throwing them over. And the reason why is because somebody had messed around with a white girl, and nobody was willing to own up who it was that I guess raped that girl, and because nobody was willing to step up to the plate, they said, well, if we can't get the one that done it, then we're going to get all of you. That way we know that we got the right one. And every one of them died because of that one occurrence. Of course, back then, I personally think that the Southern people that fought in the Civil War, they actually felt like that the biscuit had been pulled out of their mouth because, up north, they've done already colonized those areas up there. They had education up there. They done already legalized slavery in 2 different states up there. And they basically had marketed slavery in the north a whole lot more so in the south. And then all of a sudden, the north decides, well, we ain't going to do this no more. And you had a lot of people down here in the south that was actually had their eyes on getting on board with that towards making money in the slave business, towards having their own farms and stuff. So basically, the Southern people, they felt like that they got wronged because the North had already done made a profiteering off of it. And then whenever the Civil War was over with, things kind of settled down a little bit. And the next thing you know, they got to looking around, where's Uncle Tom? Well, he ain't here. He died. Where's Uncle Joe? Well, he's gone too. Well, how about Jim? Jim's gone too. And they got mad. They got a spite against it. Well, they wasn't going to go back to war with the North. So what they done, they chose to go after the black man. And that's whenever they created the KKK. And if you know anything about my territory up around Reelfoot Lake, that was in regards towards the Night Riders. Yeah. And they become mean. You hear me? They become mean because what they would do, they would go after those black people, and they would go after them like going deer hunting or something. They'd use them as a sport, and they'd run them plumb down into the bottoms before they finally captured them, and they'd drag them back up here, and it was something to brag about. Well, I done hung me a black boy. I done hung me a black boy. You know what I'm saying? And they got evil about it. Yeah. The KKK is evil.
Well, yeah, it is. I was. Yeah, ain't nobody tell me about the KKK. I was in the army with Grand Wizard, Donald Black.
Donald Black?
Yeah, they sure was. I was in the army with him. Sure was.
So you know all about the moonshining. I know you told me that you was a moonshiner at one time.
Yeah.
And that you knew a bunch of people around in the Kentucky area that used to moonshine.
Oh, yeah.
I guess you're talking about what, just east of Dover?
Well, about halfway up the trace there, we call it. Yeah, all about the Kentucky, Tennessee line, up around Golden Pond, stuff like that. Yeah, I saw 1,000 gallon one time going to Chicago. So at least that's what they said was there, man. It was unreal. It was all in jugs, just like that Coca-Cola, yeah.
There's an area before you get to the Kentucky state line there. I guess they still raise buffalo. They're right there on the state line, and they had an iron kettle or something like that right there on the right where they heated up stuff.
Well, it's where they mined ore.
Is that what it was?
Smeltered it off into pig iron, they called it.
Okay.
And it was really a low grade iron. They had to take it. They smeltered it into block. I call them pig.
I got you.
And then they re-refined it.
But anyways, you got Wild Turkey Bay up there. I think Turkey Bay's on the Kentucky side. But on the Tennessee side, there was an area up there that I stayed in for a couple of weeks. Actually, I stayed up there for about a month. I had to move my campsite because they won't allow for you to stay camping. But
2 weeks.
But 2 weeks. But it was a place called Joanne or something like that. Joanne Bay or Janice Bay or something like that.
I'm not familiar with that. That's probably a little further up than I get.
But let me ask you a question. You probably are familiar with this. How come that they didn't go all the way to Dover to the Dover Highway 89? How come they was they fighting them and keeping them from buying out all the property, or what was going on there?
Everybody's talked about that, and the best we can come up with, it was so settled then. See, it was sparsely settled up in there. And then you get to a point where it gets really settled, and it costs as much to go from the edge there to Dover as it would for the whole park. And so they just stopped buying land right there. And they had to draw a line somewhere. Everybody talks about it. Why didn't they go all the way to 79? But we don't know. That's just speculation there.
You think that the money got tight?
Well, the money got tight, and it was going to cost as much to go from the South Station to Dover as it was
Well,
for the whole
but-
dang part.
But before 1963, whenever Kennedy flew over and declared it a loss, if you turn left right there where the Tennessee and Kentucky line and drive back in there, I lucked up on it. And I went back in there and I got to looking, and there was bathhouses, there was roadways, blacktop roadways, there was picnic tables that was poured in concrete, and it used to be a park right there. And it's right there on the Kentucky state line, right next to the Tennessee River, and you can walk off to the edge of it and you can look down to the south, and you can probably look down about 5 miles, and you can turn to the right and you can look up about 5 miles. It's got to be one of the most glorious sights in all of LBL as far as being high and having that type of a view.
Yeah.
But they claim that park was made after 1939, and I mean it had 20 amp services everywhere. I mean it was set up for campers.
That part was they run everybody out from about 1963 to 66. I knew the people up there. I talked to them. I knew some of the last ones they run out. Preacher Barrow was probably one of the last they run out.
Well, do you think they
left one man up there? And he died up there,
Well, do you think that they done all? Do you think that Kennedy got assassinated because of making that move?
No, not at all.
Huh?
Not at all. Don't believe that at all. Don't believe that at all.
Well, how come you can go to Grand Rivers right now? Grand Rivers, Kentucky. You familiar with Grand Rivers?
Oh, yeah.
Up there by the dam?
Yeah.
You can go up there. Chip, he had the iron kettle where he cooked everything on a cast iron stove. Then he had that other place called Patty's 1800s. Well, the iron kettle burnt first. Then 1800s, it wound up burning. But he rebuilt all of that right there at where the 1800s place was. And he's got one room set aside that's a presidential room. He gave, I think it was over $100,000 for documents, original documents, going all the way back to the first president of the United States.
Oh.
In other words, these are all collector stuff.
Yeah.
And it's set up towards being just the president room. And I've heard it many a time from other people that Kennedy got assassinated because of LBA.
Well, you know,
You can hear anything.
You can go out here in Texas and they'll tell you he done something wrong out there. You go up to New York and all that. No, Lee Harvey Oswald shot him. And I don't know why, but that's pretty well cut and dried. It wasn't over no park over there, nothing. You could hear anything and believe anything, and it's going on television right now. There's a man on there that he'll tell one lie after the other, and everybody believes what it says.
What did you think that they done to Trump the other day?
I think they already got him. That's what I'm talking about. This guy's a nutcase. He's a real nutcase. And
He's a swindler.
He's
a swindler, and he got that off of making all them contract deals up there in New York, and they actually hate him up there because he burnt so many people up there. I'm talking about he would walk away and owe people for months of work, and ain't no telling how many hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work. He would walk away from them and just stick it to them. He was shrewd. He was a swindler.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
He's a nutcase, all right. That's for dang sure. I mean, but I believe he's in trouble this time. My gosh, he's got about 4 or 5 lawsuits going right now. But is documented
under espionage charges.
Yeah.
The only way that they're going to be able to prove espionage charges on him if he was taking that material and he was selling it or trading it to other countries for privileges or for whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We just don't have to
let the court do its thing.
Before we speculate on anything, we just have to wait and see what they say.
But if he was doing that, I'm like you. I think he ought to be punished to the fullest extent of the law, don't you?
Well, yeah, sure he ought.
If he was doing that. And you know good and well, he knew that stuff was top secret. He knew that. And whenever the FBI asked him to bring it in there, and he rebelled, I think they actually went at him 2 or 3 different times for trying to get him to
Oh, yeah.
to turn it in, and he wouldn't turn it in.
Yeah, I know it.
But I think that's a smokescreen towards actually getting him on the stand and actually going after him for insurrection of creating that partial coup. That you can't call it a full-fledged coup because they didn't take the government over, but it was an attempted coup that was basically an insurrection, meaning that it got about halfway there. But if the truth be known, they're probably going to go after him for insurrection.
That's a whole different thing.
I know it's a whole different thing, but once they get him in there, it's all going to be thrown into one. I'm telling you. I'm telling you right now that, and they can do it. See, they can still bring up more charges on him right now.
And here's what I don't understand at all. There's still about a third of the country that's backing him all the way.
Including the Republican Party.
All the way.
Including the Republican Party.
I can't understand that.
I do. I do. You know what it is? They know that they've been hoodwinked because they come in on the latter part. In other words, they inherited other people's mistakes towards other politicians that's got us in this trouble. We didn't get in this trouble just over one man. This has taken a period of administrations to get us into trouble that we're in right now. And it actually goes back into the Reagans and Mr. Bush's era before Desert Storm and Desert Shield that got us in the trouble that we're in. That's whenever America took a left turn instead of taking a right. And then Bill Clinton had his fingerprints all over what went on down there in Waco. Bill Clinton had his fingerprints all over what went on over there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And then it wasn't long after that till here come the main 9/11. Well, during the time of the Waco standoff, the Twin Towers had already been attacked. It didn't bring them down, but the Twin Towers had already had an attempt on the Twin Towers. That was about the time whenever Ruby Ridge was going on, whenever they wound up killing that man's wife and his son up there, way up there in the hills.
I don't know. I know we're in a mess.
Well, we're taking the wrong turn.
We're
just like going to war with Afghanistan. If you don't have the blessings of the Lord on your side, your attempts is going to be. I mean, to go over there and try to reform a group of people like the Afghanistan people, that's a good thing, right? But it's very obvious that 11 days after we walk away, they basically lay down and allow for the Taliban to take them back over again. So that tells you right there that our works was in vain.
Well, now I'm going to have to add something to that. I had a student when I was teaching school, and he was a short boy. Well, he went to the 5th Special Forces and retired from them the other day. And I asked him, I said, Fred, tell me about the Afghanistan. And this is what he said. And I've got to look this up. He said they didn't know there was Afghanistan. He said that's something that the world order's hung on. That's going to be their country. He said they're tribal people. They know what tribe they're in, but said some of them never heard the word Afghanistan. That's something that the public has hung on and made a country. So we're going to call it Afghanistan. And he said a lot of them don't even know it because he's right in the thick of it. He's up there. He pulled 2 or 3 tours up there. He was a medic. And he told me, he said, there's not, it's what he said.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that because you got so many different groups up there. I think in total it's about 67 or 70 different groups.
Well,
that's just as bad. One group is just as bad as the other, and it's kind of like trying to play king of the mountain towards who's one's going to be in control. And to think that we was goofy enough to think that those people was trained and that they had been reformed towards telling us that as soon as y'all leave, we're gonna maintain, we're gonna keep them sharp and keep them to the row. And as soon as we walk away, 11 days later, they surrender. You know, we spent 10 years there and about $3 trillion or $4 trillion, not counting all the human casualties and the arms and the legs and the psychological damage that it's caused in people's lives. Like I said, it's a good theory on paper to say, well, we're going to go over there and we're going to reform these people. And it's another thing to actually have the Holy Spirit within you to be able to reform people over there, because it's going to take an act of God to be able to reform anybody. It don't matter if it's a moonshiner, it don't matter if it's a drug dealer, and it don't matter if it's somebody from another country. It's going to take the Holy Spirit to reform that person.
He told me, he said he pulled a lot of tours in South America on drug stuff, but I asked him, I said, well, how about the Iraqis? He said, the Iraqis will be all right. They've structured. He said, they'll work it out. Told me, he said, there ain't nothing, not one thing we can do for Afghanistan.
What it was, the Bushes and the Cheneys, you know, we went over there at Libya and we bombed the heck out of Libya because we know that some of those terrorists come from Libya. But then somebody got an idea, well, let's just go to Afghanistan because they're a bunch of bad people. We'll blame 9/11 on Afghanistan. Well, I got news for you. Afghanistan didn't have the money, and Afghanistan wasn't smart enough to pull what went off in 9/11. You know who pulled off 9/11? Saudi Arabia pulled off 9/11. Now, they acted like whenever bin Laden got fingered, well, let's just ban bin Laden from Saudi Arabia and let's just act like we don't have nothing to do with him because he was their cousin. But I know for a fact that various FBI agents has done a track on where that money was coming from that was feeding those terrorists while they was setting up in hotels and stuff. And you know where the money trail leads back to?
Saudi Arabia.
Yes, sir.
Saudi.
Yes, sir.
They're cunning type people, but back to this idiot on television here that could get the presidency again if he does. We in deep crap. And I just can't see how anybody in their right mind could even think about supporting this guy. It just boggles my mind that there's people.
Well, have you ever asked yourself this?
I'll tell you what they remind me of. Have you ever turned over to this wrestling crap, this WWE?
Oh yeah.
And see these people.
Well, they do the same thing with the attorneys. You can have two strong cases right up here in Henry County, and one group will go after the other group like they're fixing to pull off their shirt and go to fighting right in the middle of the courtroom. But then, after it's all said and done with, you'll see those same two attorneys that was wanting to kill one another down there in a grocery store somewhere, or you'll see them drinking coffee together. You know what I'm saying? It's a game. It's a game. I'm telling you, it's a game.
Well, sure it is. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the people that are out there in the audience that are doing all this yelling and screaming and cussing and whatever, that every time I see it, I tell them.
You remember Jerry Springer? You remember Jerry Springer up in Chicago that would hype the people up and get them to where they was swinging and kicking and chawing and pulling hair and everything else on there?
That's Trump people right there.
That's right. That's your Trump people right there. He's an entertainer. He's not a professional politician. But have you ever asked yourself this question? What if Donald Trump was hanging on to some material that he authentically thought that we, the people, should have known about, and because of them crooked people up there in the White House, it's been concealed or top secret, and maybe Donald Trump had a purpose for hanging on to that material.
That's the whole thing in a nutshell that I have thought about. I don't know. I don't have no idea. But I've thought about why did he want to conceal that and keep it?
And I also,
was that an ace in the hole?
That's right. That's right. Because he had done already made mention, is whenever they had that golf tournament 2 years ago, whenever the people in New York reared up about it, because actually it was Donald Trump that made the deal with the people in Afghanistan that was going to do the deal in Washington, D.C. And man, they all reared up about that. They said, you ain't bringing them people over here in Washington, D.C. So they went ahead and made the deal, and then Biden had to pick up on the end of it, right? Well, it was Trump that made that deal.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, getting back to the Saudi Arabians, they're dirty, and Donald Trump knows that they're dirty, and he told the American people about a year ago. He said the American people still have not gotten down to the bottom of 9/11.
I don't know.
And you have to ask yourself another question. Why did Donald Trump kick off his second election in Waco, Texas, of all places.
I don't have no idea.
You think it had anything to do with what went on in Waco pertaining to the 1993 Davidian standoff whenever they wound up killing them people on a 51-day standoff? You think it had anything to do with that?
I don't know. I really don't.
Because they're now saying that was an intentional murder that the United States government, different people in the United States government at that time was working for either FBI or U.S. Marshals or the ATF, that basically they planned in an entrapment deal towards killing them people. Because they was the ones that sold them all the guns to begin with. And then they turned around and busted them for the guns.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And they could have gotten David Koresh going out of that compound, he was always going to Lowe's, he was always leaving and going to restaurants. If they wanted just to get him, with him being the main master, they could have got him at any time.
I don't know what went on.
And then on the 51 day, whenever the raid had already, whenever the order had already been given, the judge had already signed off on the warrant. The raid got sprung, and they was waiting. They was laying wait. They knew that they was coming after them that day. And once that supervisor, whoever it was that was in charge of all that, once he realized that they was on to him, he should have cut it off. He should have said, "No, we ain't gonna do it this way." But he went ahead and pursued it. You know why they pursued it that way? Because they was wanting to turn it into a big hullabaloo.
I don't know.
Well, it turned into a hullabaloo, all right. It turned into something that they couldn't handle. A matter of fact, it was the ATF that started all that ruckus, and as soon as the FBI got down there, they took charge. They took over the ATF. And it was the FBI that went through that whole 51-day scenario, and basically, once they declared them, I think it went from a rescue mission to a doomsday mission, and they used 90 canisters of tear gas on that building for 6 consecutive hours while a tank was driving holes in the building, bringing breathing vents in there, and all it took was one match. And you know good and well that those women and them men that was down in that lower part of that area, they had to have light, they had to have candles or coal oil lamps or something to be able to see what they was doing down there, because electricity had been shut off from day one.
I don't know.
And all it would have taken was one spark, because you can see the way that the building caught a fire. It was kind of like a sizzling type fire. It started on one end and it went to the other end, but within 7 to 10 seconds, if you'll analyze the pictures, the tin on top of the roof had already started smoldering. And it didn't just start in one area, it was the whole roof. Now, if that would have been done with gasoline, if somebody, because it was a 2-story deal, it was a big building, let's say you had 50 people on the top, 50 people on the bottom, and you took gasoline, everybody had 5-gallon can of gas, and they throwed it all over the walls, throwed it all over the top, throwed it all over the bottom, and then everybody backed up and they lit the thing. You know what would have happened to that building with gas, if it was gasoline that caught it afire? It would have blown the top off, it would have blown the walls out of it, and you'd have seen a big ball of nothing but black smoke, because gasoline's got oil content in it. Gasoline is an oil product. Come from oil.
I have no idea. I don't know.
It was the tear gas that killed the people. And whoever it was that gave the order for the tear gas ought to be held for murder.
I don't know.
Ought to be. And see, Timothy McVeigh knew that. And that's the reason why that he was trying to he was trying to vindicate those people's death by going over there and blowing that Oklahoma building up, because the Oklahoma building was the ones that was given, that was the headquarters, because it was such of a high intensity case. They got it out of Texas, and it was Oklahoma that was taking the orders from Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. would give the orders to Oklahoma. Oklahoma would give the orders to down towards Mount Carmel or Waco. And it was an interchange, because it was such of a high volume case. They was doing that because there was too many cameras, too many eyeballs. And I think after about the 40th day, Janet Reno and Bill Clinton said, you know what? This is making us look bad. Let's just change the dynamics and go from a rescue mission to a doomsday mission. And that's whenever somebody put an order out towards, okay, none of them going to live through this. They're doomed. And I personally believe that somebody brought in about 4 boxes of dynamite that was supposed to originally been used on the Davidians down in Mount Carmel. It just so happened somebody got smart and said, well, you know what? We can take this tear gas. See, they make 5 different types of tear gases. 3 of them ain't never supposed to be used on women and children. And 4 of them out of that is never supposed to be used indoors. So to put tear gas in a building, you have to take a lot of the ingredients out of that tear gas before you're supposed to use it. I guarantee you they didn't take nothing out of that tear gas. They know that tear gas was lethal, and if you pump enough of it in there, 90 canisters, 6 hours of steadily pumping tear gas into a building, you know good and well, if they turned it into a towering inferno. But anyways, they got lucky on the 51 day, and then they had to use that dynamite. So they kept that dynamite in that basement. They took a sheet and they threw it over it and said, well, we'll move it out of here later. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into 2 years. And on the actual date, whenever Timothy McVeigh and that boy come on there with that Ryder truck and that fertilizer, explosion number 1 caused explosion number 2 to go off. Because they found detonators all in the bottom part of the basement that they never exposed to the American people during all that stuff. And if you know anything about dynamite at all, once dynamite gets made up, those wax tubes that they're in, you start seeing that condensation coming from that wax. That ain't moisture. You know what that is?
Yeah, nitroglycerin.
Nitroglycerin. That means that dynamite can become so displacive that if you had a stick of it in this building right here and somebody slammed that door just right, you could set it off.
I shot dynamite over in East Tennessee for a power company over there. That's what I done. Me and an old powder monkey from TVA, we shot a lot of it.
How many boxes you think you shot off?
Oh, getting over it, I don't know a lot of it.
10, 20?
Oh, yeah, ever been that, I guess. I don't know.
You know, one stick of dynamite will blow a house all to
I
pieces.
always put 2 and 3 and 4 in them hold over there at Rocky.
What was you blowing up beaver dams and stuff?
No. We put power lines through